Welcome back to another episode of The Lion, the Way, and the War, where we discuss Jesus, his church, and the spiritual battle that surrounds us all. Stop. I have no idea why I said it that
Do
way.
that again?
The spiritual battle. Hello, everybody. I'm Mickey Mouse.
Oh, I hope you put that in the episode.
Cut. All right, you
You're
ready?
good to go again.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Lion.
Can you do that one more time and not shout into the mic? The spiritual battle that surrounds us all.
All right.
Just give me a good happy medium.
All right, hang on. Let me get serious again. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Lion, the Way, and the War, where we discuss Jesus, his church, and the spiritual battle that surrounds us all. My name is Craig Allison.
My name is Brandon Bonner.
And we'll be your host. Okay, so if you tuned in last week, we were starting this series of episodes that talks about our entertainment, the culture that we're in, and so we're going to continue that. Last week we talked a little bit about TV shows and movies and crossing the line. This week we're talking about step a little even further with horror films as far as entertainment, demonic stuff. What are we inviting in? And so I'm gonna start this episode with this very bizarre story, and I can say this because this person is no longer alive, and I'm not gonna say her name anyway. But years ago, there was a church that I attended, and there was an elder. His wife loved to go to scary movies, and she would park as far away as she could and go watch this horror movie. And then after the movie was over with, she was scared out of her mind, and she had to walk back in the dark to her car that she had purposely parked far away so she could intensify that fear that she felt. And I've just always remembered that. And it's been a curious thing for me to think about what's taking place in the mind, the psychology behind why we want to do that. I mean, I get that there's that adrenaline rush and that kind of thing, fear from horror movies evokes that, that scare factor, where people jump, when something jumps out at you. This is fun, it's entertaining, and I get that. But there's this dark element into all of this, and so that's kind of what we're going to be exploring today. And specifically, I've got some research stuff that I want to share here. But before I do that, because I don't think I just handed you this, so you really haven't looked at where we're going with this at all. So just as that is the setup, I'm just gonna knock this ball over to your end here and see what your initial thoughts or reactions are.
So I'm scared of horror films, so I am not a guy that has experience with that. However, something that I have kind of recently dealt with is being immersed. We're immersed in violence. And I think it's probably because of the age of information and smartphones. I mean, you can record everything. Yep. So I think about, obviously an issue in our country has been mass shootings, and those are, publicized and televised, and, body cam footage of police officers, which has, brought a lot of good, but also has brought a lot of, you're seeing violent acts happen.
Yeah.
And they're public, and you can go out there and watch it. Yep. Recently we've had public assassinations, that's out there on the media, and you can see and watch, and it's horrific. And I told, we've talked about this in the past. It actually caused me to delete social media. I wasn't looking for it. It just was on my feed.
Yeah.
seeing someone killed it messed with me a
Yep.
lot.
Yep.
I couldn't sleep. I mean, it was just, and didn't know the person, but it still just is horrific to watch life being taken away in such a heinous act. And so I think that's what my mind goes to, is that we have slowly, because of the age of information and because this stuff is so accessible to us, you either, I mean, you have to naturally become desensitized to it over time.
Yeah.
It just doesn't impact you enough to be able to just withdraw from it completely. I mean, it just really, really messed with me seeing some of that stuff, and you can still see it, and I still get it sometimes. I've been able to do some things on my social media, which is kind of like blocks that content. And there's those filters, right? That says, do you want to see this? And you have to like click through it.
Yeah.
But some of it isn't there before it's kind of flagged. I mean, so it's dark stuff, man. And I think that can put you in a really bad headspace.
Yeah, I'm going to be sharing some really scary things here. You've touched on it. Here's the the horrifying thing is that when you start down that road, it pulls you in and you begin seeking it out. It is very dark. It is very sinister. So let me share some of the research here. You mentioned school shooters. So I'm talking about mass shooters, these atrocities. So the research has found that the vast majority of these perpetrators that go to like schools, they start gunning down children, kids, and we look at that and like a lot of times what media comes out and says is these folks were mentally ill, they had an agenda, maybe it was politically motivated. Here's the fact though, that the vast majority of these kids, this is the part that is not publicized, that they were immersed in very dark, very violent content. So they were seeking it out on their social media feeds. You mentioned, the thing where you have to click and say, that you want to see that. They're bypassing all of that. They're searching out these videos and clips and snippets of actual people having their lives taken. They have a violent fascination with violence, death, or notoriety. There's a desensitization process to this violence that begins to take place. So this repeated exposure to violent media leads them to this reduced emotional response to violence. So they are less disturbed by violence. They're less empathetic towards victims. You saw this, and you were probably alluding to the Charlie Kirk assassination. So what was interesting in that case is that, first of all, there weren't filters. It just was popping up on people's feeds, seeing this guy's life being taken from him. But what was very interesting was the mass amount of people that came out. This is indicative of how pervasive this is that we're talking about, that had no sensitization to it. They were laughing. They were making jokes. He deserved it. And that's just the surface. It got a lot worse than that. And we're not talking like a couple hundred people. We're not talking a couple thousand. We're talking tens of thousands of people making those crass comments, reposting the video, that kind of thing. So that tells you just how pervasive this issue is and just how desensitized our culture has become to the horrific, the truly dark stuff. Okay. Another research finding, the more participants were used to media violence, the less emotionally responsive they became over a lot of different areas of their life. So over time, their fear decreases. In some cases, pleasure response to violence increases. So that's that seeking out behavior that you see. Many of the studies have shown that there is a statistical link between violent media exposure, and that includes all the social media stuff, entertainment stuff. It's all lumped there together. So violent media exposure, dark matter consumption, and aggressive thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. So a statistical link to those. There's mental health effects that have been studied, especially in youth, so 18 or younger, that exposure to violent or dark media is associated with high increases in anxiety, depression, sleep disturbance, and fear-based worldviews. So all this to say that, and we touched on this last week, when we talked about viewing other stuff, this is not neutral territory. Darkness is not neutral territory, and the Bible treats spiritual darkness as real, as very influential. It's not fictional, and it's definitely not harmless. Okay, so let's pause right there for just a second, because I know that's probably all new to you. We didn't talk about this before the podcast. What are your initial reaction to that information?
I mean, initial reaction is I am not super surprised. In terms of the research that you've done and kind of the statistics around the ties into, the increase in violent media consumption results in a slew of different mental health issues. And, man, it's kind of, it's scary, because it is such a seemingly growing form of entertainment or exposure, maybe is a better word. I mean, I just think, I don't know. I mean, I don't remember all these violent acts being as publicly accessible. I mean, maybe the only thing I can think of is, and this is well before my time and your time, but the JFK assassination. I mean, that's the only thing I can think of where, you had a public figure that was assassinated, and if I remember correctly, studying that time period, it was pretty significant impact to the people. And then, fast forward to today, and it's like it's high definition. You can see everything, and people being desensitized to it, regardless of your political stance. That's really concerning. I mean, because it was a life that was taken. Thinking about Charlie Kirk assassination, and thinking about, how seeing that stuff really could, on a constant basis, there's entire subreddits out there of you can just watch people die all the time.
And a lot of people are.
Yeah.
They're addicted to it.
Yep. And we're talking like worse than, the Charlie Kirk assassination type stuff that you can find on Reddit.
Yeah. So I want to make this statement because this kind of is the foundation underneath all of this stuff that a lot of people are going to blow off. That really, if you have a biblical worldview, and I think pretty much everybody that listens to this podcast does, that these are demonic themes. There's no other way to classify this. This is a scriptural statement. When we go to the book of Ephesians, we see this pointed out that our battle is not against the physical flesh. It's against demonic forces. And so I think part of the issue as to why there's a lot of just sitting back on this and not realizing how pervasive or how serious this is because Christians, and this sounds crazy, but I'm going to say it, Christians have a problem with the concept of demonic forces that are still possibly operating in our world today. And that's highly problematic. And so I'm not exactly sure where that narrative comes from. I don't see it in the Bible. I don't see any evidence that when Jesus resurrected and spent time with his apostles and then he ascended into heaven, that all of Satan's fallen angels and the demonic hordes left the earth too. I see just the opposite in Scripture, that this is his domain. And so why is it that we would not struggle with the idea of like angels being, guardians and messengers, and that, we don't have a problem thinking about angels being here and helping in whatever ways. But all of a sudden, if we talk about a demon or a demonic angel or a fallen angel, whatever classification you want to put them, all of a sudden we're like, oh, no, that's not biblical at all. Mm-hmm. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think we need to be talking about this. I think that we have kind of strayed away from this concept that there's spiritual warfare, things that are going on, not to get too crazy, but there's things that are going on that we cannot physically see. In a spiritual dimension, there's war going on between good and evil, between angels and demons, and that's scriptural. And I can't. I'm in agreement. I can't find anywhere in Scripture that says that's just went away. And so I think it's important for us to recognize that, to be talking about it, that there's spiritual warfare going on all around us. And to put it in the form of entertainment
Right.
is such a powerful thing to sway us away from it. Because it's almost like that's not even real.
Yeah.
You know, you go see a horror film and you're like, well, it's entertainment. That's not real. You know, you play violent video games or watch violent clips or action movies. I mean, not to get too crazy. I do all those things, but you kind of get to a point where it's not real. So you begin to not be able to separate what's real and what's not real. And then it kind of, those lines start to get blurry, and you're, you know, what kind of spiritual headspace are you in?
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because here's the reason why I think this is such a dangerous thing. Satan, you know, when you go back, you've got this biblical worldview, right? You go back and you understand, you begin to read and see how he operated within the earthly realms, within the physical realms. You know, you go back to the Genesis account, and you see his operating standards there. And if there's one thing that you can say about Satan, is that he is a genius when it comes to strategy and planning. And he understands his environment, he understands his enemy, and he adapts. And so the last thing he wants is for us to point out the enemy and go, well, that's satanic. That's Satan. Because then, oh, you know, we've exposed the enemy, right? And he doesn't want that. If he can package darkness and chaos and evil in a way that is going to exclude him from the playing field, that what better way to trap us, where we don't even realize we're in the cage that he's created. And so he's done that by turning horror, evil, darkness, death, occult type stuff into something we pay to go see and entertain ourselves with. Dude, that's genius. I mean, hats off to him for pulling that off. And you know, just look at how pervasive it is. You know, I went through some of the numbers there, and that's why there's other examples, but the Charlie Kirk one is the most recent that stands out. When I'm talking about, like, you had tens of thousands of people that were embracing and celebrating something that was horrific. You know, that is look at the revenue from the movies in Hollywood that are putting out. The amount of demonic movies that are being put out has exponentially grown year after year after year. That's telling a story, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I want to go back to something I said last week, and it was self-awareness. But in this case, I think it's important for us to be self-aware that there is, as you put in your hook of your intro, there's a spiritual battle that surrounds us all. I mean, that is fact. That's happening. You know, we see Ephesians 6, right? Paul talks about there's a spiritual warfare that's going on. There's
right.
these principalities and evils and things that are going on, and then he outlines how do you defend it, which I think is a great thing for us to revisit from time to time. Like, how do we guard ourselves against this spiritual warfare? And then I think about Romans chapter 7, where, you know, Paul is alluding to his own internal spiritual warfare. You know, he wants to do things that are right and do things that are good, but he finds himself struggling to do that and always finding himself doing things that are not good and are evil. I mean, that is our day-to-day walk as Christians, as believers in Christ and followers of Christ, that we're going to face some intense spiritual battles, very intense spiritual battles.
Yeah.
And I mean, I agree. What a great way to wrap it up in the form of entertainment or desensitizing to us, so we're not even aware that we're facing those spiritual battles. So it's just kind of like, it's not a big deal. It's not real.
Yeah. Do you have the Ephesians 6 opened up?
I do.
Read that verse, because I want to break that down just a little bit so our readers understand what's actually being talked about here.
Yep. So I'm just going to start in Ephesians chapter 6, starting in verse 10. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the schemes of evil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities.
Stop there. Rulers and authorities. When you look at the original there, those are talking about demonic forces. Okay. Principalities.
Against the cosmic powers
Okay.
over this present darkness,
Mhm.
against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places.
I don't know. Some versions will say principalities. All of those are referring to demonic forces, demonic entities, hordes of Satan. These are all dark entities that have some level of supernatural powers and abilities, and that's what I'm talking about when I talked about Jesus ascending into heaven. Those forces, those entities are still here, and they're still waging war against us. There's nothing in the entire Bible that indicates that those demonic forces left. As a matter of fact, Satan is called the prince of this world. So this is his domain, this is his world, and he roams it. And he looks for every opportunity to pull us away from God, to sow seeds of chaos, to bring this world into darkness. And he does that through this incredibly effective means of taking that which is demonic and cult-like and turning it into pop culture entertainment.
Yep.
And we're just sitting here unaware
Yep.
of it all.
Yep.
And so I think about, I've seen some clips, and I know this is, I'm going to get some hate on this one because of some of the names that I've listed here. Again, last week I drew a line, so I'm on this theme now of actually calling things out, just so people will with this context in mind, go back and I encourage you, go back and look at some of this stuff. It is not done by accident. There's intention there, and whether these artists are aware of this or whether they're being manipulated, I don't know. But what it is food for us to be consuming into our minds and our brains. And I think Satan is doing that so he can desensitize us to it. So you can go back and you can look at some things, some concerts, and the imagery there by Lady Gaga is one example. Marilyn Manson, he's overtly satanic. Taylor Swift, yep. I have to question some things that she's put out that is really like, wait, what? Why the dark imagery there? Why the overtones of things that are like crossing over into occult type imagery? Okay. Billie Eilish, Doja Cat is out there, Alice Cooper, Ghost, Slipknot. So these are some of the entertainers, and again, there's a lot of other ones that we could throw out there. Madonna, she's one of the older ones. We're paying money to see this, and we love it because it's entertaining. But it's things that we're allowing into our minds where we're accepting this as things that are suitable to consume. And I can't help but to envision Satan sitting back and just laughing and pointing at us and going, there's a Christian spending money on my guys, on my team. What does that say about them? So I think it requires us to really examine and discern and think, what is it that I'm actually, how is this making me a better Christian?
Yeah, and I'm probably going to get thrown stones at me for saying this, but I mean, I think it bleeds the other way as well. And I want to say something that maybe resonates a little bit more with some of the listeners in terms of, I'm just going to say, thinking about the president's most recent AI post. I know you posted about that on Facebook being kind of not a great post, right? Portraying himself as a Red Cross doctor, but assume looks just like Christ. I mean, that's,
yeah.
And even like the imagery in the background, like there's this weird figure above his head. I mean, so I think that we have to recognize as Christians, regardless of what you feel about the post or any of the, the authors on here, artists on here, that we're being manipulated.
Yeah.
and we're being taken advantage of because we are desensitized to all of this darkness and evilness. And I think that it ties us back into taking a visit. Encourage our listeners to look at Ephesians chapter 6, look at that whole passage, but really look at the armor of God and what Paul says there. Because he gives some really practical ways that you can combat and protect yourself from spiritual warfare and how to overcome it.
Yeah, and too, just talking about, and this isn't getting political at all, but I some of the pushback there where, I mean, I'm pretty, I'm conservative, from a political standpoint, and I put that post out there because it did concern me. Several of his latest, the president's latest posts have just been very concerning. It has concerned his base, the conservative base, because of just the negative nature of it, and putting that out there and having pushback on people saying, "Oh, well, that he didn't put that out there." And it's like he admitted it, right? It's out there, and so that level of wanting to defend, and this is coming from both angles now. It's not just right, it's left, it's everybody wanting to defend things that are wrong.
Yep.
And things that are dark, things that are sacrilegious,
Yes.
things that are irreverent, things that as Christians we're called not to do those things. And so I really want to caution us to think about what it is that we're defending.
Absolutely.
And again, I envision Satan sitting back and just laughing at us because he has sowed these seeds of discord, these seeds of darkness, and we're like little birds just pecking it all up, gorging ourselves on it. And I think it's time as Christians that we set a new standard, a new example. We call each other to task. We call each other out on stuff because we're looking out for one another. We rebuke when necessary in love, obviously, and we've talked about that. But that we're not afraid. We haven't lost our voice, and we're not afraid of being critiqued. I think that's the only way that we battle this. Talk about the armor of God. He talks about the breastplate and the shield and truth, and he talks about that. Where is truth? We need to put that back out in front of us.
Yep, absolutely.
Even if it hurts feelings, my feelings sometimes need to be hurt, especially if you're speaking truth into my life. I'm going to come around. I'm going to thank you for it later on because my salvation might have depended on it.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's important to remember what Paul says a little bit earlier in Ephesians 2, talking about unity and being unified and the power in that and walking in love. I mean, there's a lot of things. It's easy, I think, just to try to lighten up the mood of this episode. It's easy to have a lot of fear and be concerned and scared of the things that are going on, and spiritual warfare is it's scary, right? But we should have comfort and confidence in knowing that we are Christians. We are followers of Christ.
And the Apostle Paul writes to Timothy, he's mentoring Timothy about that very thing. He says, we are not given a spirit of fear. We're given a spirit of power. The Greek word there, power, is where we get our word dynamite from. And that's a cool thing because there's dark stuff that's happening, but we're the victors in this. Satan doesn't win this battle. And if we're putting on the armor of God, we recognize who our enemy actually is, then we're prepared to go to war with him, to battle him. It's interesting that, when it lists out in that passage all of the different armor and stuff, there's nothing for the back, which means, we're not turning our back on Satan and running away. We're not retreating. We are taking the offense. We're taking the battle to him because we're the victors in this.
Absolutely.
So, yep. Good stuff. Closing thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think it's important to talk about these things. So, I think I encourage you to share it. I encourage us to continue to have this conversation because this is a serious topic. It's important for us to have these discussions and talk about spiritual warfare. Heaven, I like what you put here, it doesn't celebrate fear, darkness, or demons. So why would we want to train our mind to oppress God's nature?
Right.
And so, if this episode challenged you, please share it. If you didn't like it, let us know. If you liked it, let us know. We're on all the major platforms: YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're also on Ministry League, so shout out to some of our sponsors there. They have a really good app with a lot of good resources on there. Also want to plug, of course, Central Church of Christ here in downtown Chattanooga, where we film all of our episodes. And then finally, our other podcast, which is After Sunday, which is diving deeper into our Sunday mornings here at Central.
Yep. After Sunday, Digging Deeper, I think is the name.
Yep. Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's all I got.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, folks, until our next episode of The Lion, the Way, and the War, be kind to one another, love one another, and remember the Creator of the universe loves you so much that he gave up his only son for you. Have a blessed day.